All right, let's get right into it. Imagine a law gets passed that could literally unlock homeownership for millions of people. A fantastic idea written right into the legal code. But then, crickets. For over a decade. This is the story of a promise put on hold. And today, we're going to unravel the mystery of why 13. Let's start with that number. 13 years. That's how long it took from the moment Ghana passed a revolutionary housing finance law until the very first financial product based on that law actually hit the market. Think about that. 13 years is an incredibly long time to wait for a good idea. You know, the original idea was so simple and so powerful. Back in 2008, the National Pensions Act was passed, and tucked inside was this game-changing provision. It allowed workers to use their own pension savings, the money they're putting away for retirement, to secure a mortgage for their first home. This was supposed to be the key that would finally unlock the door to the housing market for so many Ghanaians.
But that key just sat there, totally unused. It wasn't until 2021 that the first real pension-backed mortgage was offered to anyone. I mean, to put that in perspective, the law was passed just a year after the first iPhone came out, and the first product didn't appear until the middle of a global pandemic. That is a massive and frankly confusing gap.
So, the big question we have to ask is, what on earth went wrong? Why did a law with so much potential just sit on a shelf collecting dust for so long? Was the law itself flawed? Did people just not know about it? Or was there something else going on behind the scenes? Well, let's investigate. First up, let's just make sure we're all on the same page with the lingo. The system is called Pension Asset-Backed Housing Finance, or PABHF for short. I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but the concept is really straightforward. It just means your pension savings, which are normally locked away until you retire, can be used as security, as collateral, to help you get a loan to buy a house today. And this chart really shows you just how big of a deal this is. On the left, you've got the conventional mortgage in Ghana. Think of it as trying to climb a sheer cliff with insane interest rates up to 37% and huge down payments. But on the right, the pension-backed mortgage, it's like a bridge to homeownership. You're looking at lower rates and maybe even no down payment at all. It's a total game changer. And if you want a hard number, here it is, 500 basis points. For those of you who aren't in finance, that's a full 5 percentage point drop in interest rates. 5%. On even a modest loan, that can save a family thousands and thousands of cedis every single year. So the benefits here are huge and very, very real. Okay, so if the idea is that good, why the 13-year delay? Well, the most obvious suspect, the one everyone kind of assumes, is just simple ignorance. The theory is that the banks and the pension companies, they just didn't know about this part of the law. Seems plausible, right? But let's see what the research actually found. And this is where the story takes a turn. When researchers actually surveyed the key players, they found that a lot of them were aware. Look at this. More than half the pension trustees, 56% of them, knew about the law. So while, yeah, some people were in the dark, ignorance clearly wasn't the main reason this thing stalled. Something else was going on. And that, right there, is the real puzzle. If a good chunk of the industry knew about this powerful tool, why wasn't anybody using it? This tells us the problem runs way deeper than just needing to send out a memo or run an awareness campaign. Knowing about the law just wasn't enough.
And this is where the research points us to the real culprit. It wasn't ignorance. It was a failure to coordinate. You had two essential groups needed to make this work, the banks and the pension trustees, and they simply could not get on the same page to pull it off.
This slide really just nails the difference, doesn't it? The popular belief was so simple. Oh, they just didn't know. But the research finding, the reality, was so much more complicated and honestly much harder to solve. They couldn't cooperate to actually implement it. Just listen to this quote from the source material, because it says it all. The 13-year gap was not caused by ignorance of the law. It was caused by the absence of the institutional infrastructure that the law assumed would exist but never created. The law was like a brilliant engine, but nobody had built a car around it. No contracts, no rules, no shared understanding, just a powerful engine sitting on the factory floor. So let's break that down a bit. Why did the cooperation fail so badly? Well, the research uncovered this massive gap in enthusiasm between the two groups that had to work together. And this chart just lays it bare. Look at this difference, it's incredible. On the one hand, you have the banks. Over 70% of them were eager to offer these loans. They saw clear opportunity. But then you look at the pension trustees, the people who actually control the money, and only a quarter of them are interested. That's your bottleneck.
The banks were ready to open the door, but the trustees were holding the key and they were not ready to turn it. And this table tells us exactly why they were so hesitant. And when you look at it, their concerns were pretty rational. From the trustees' point of view, the risks were huge. For one, many workers simply didn't have enough saved up to act as real collateral. Plus, let's be honest, trustees are experts at managing safe government bonds, not at figuring out the messy, complicated risks of the real estate market. It's a totally different world for them. This quote from one of the trustees they interviewed really says it all. Their whole job, their regulations, everything pushes them towards these super safe, predictable government investments. So for them, venturing into the unknown housing market, well, it felt like a massive, uncalculated risk. Their reluctance wasn't irrational. It was a product of the entire system they operate in. And that brings us to what might be the single biggest institutional hurdle of all, a huge legal gray zone. And it all centered on one very scary question. What happens when someone can't pay their mortgage? So here's the crucial point. Ghana had laws for regular foreclosures. That wasn't the issue. The problem was that those laws had nothing specific about what to do when pension assets are involved. This created this huge, unanswered question. If a borrower defaults, who gets their money back first? Is it the bank that gave the loan? Or is it all the other workers whose retirement savings are in that same pension fund? Since nobody knew the answer, every single potential deal just felt incredibly risky and uncertain. So we've diagnosed the problem. It's not ignorance. It's a lack of institutional infrastructure, and it's driven by some very rational caution from the pension trustees. But here's the great thing about this research. It doesn't just point out the problem. It gives us a clear blueprint for how to fix it.
And here it is, a clear three-part agenda. First, institutional reform. You have to create the missing rulebook, write clear guidelines, standard contracts, and most importantly, clear foreclosure rules. Second, structural reform. You protect the collateral by placing a temporary hold on other withdrawals from a pension fund that's being used to back a mortgage. And third, capacity reform. You just train everybody. Get the trustees up to speed on housing finance and get the bankers up to speed on how pension funds work. Build that bridge of knowledge between their two worlds.
All right, so let's bring this all home. From law to reality, because this isn't just some academic thought experiment. Closing this gap between the law on the books and the reality on the ground has massive implications for millions of Ghanaian workers and for the entire national economy. And this is the statistic that should really give everyone hope. At the time of the research, there were 3 banks in Ghana actually offering these products, but there were 22 more that wanted to. The market appetite is there, the demand is there. All that's missing is the institutional framework to connect them. And that leaves us with one final, powerful question. The 13-year mystery has been solved. The blueprint for the fix is clear. It's not impossibly expensive or technically difficult. It just requires coordination. So the question is no longer what's wrong, but rather, who will step up to build the bridge?